Welcome to NJ Today. I'm Assemblyman John McKeon. Now, it's not that often that you're granted an interview with a Secret Service agent who has protected presidents, kings, queens, and various other heads of state. Former agent Jan Gilhooly is not your typical Essex County resident, and we know he can't divulge too much about his exciting career, but we're hoping he can give us a little bit of tidbit here, there, and the other thing about the Department of Homeland Security and so much else. Jan Gilhooly, welcome to you.
John, good morning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, one of the most prestigious West Orange residents.
That's very nice of you to say that.
Jan, I don't even know where to start, but I guess the beginning is a good place. Like, how does one determine I'm going to be a Secret Service agent?
It's kind of is an interesting concept for me. I had the opportunity after college to go to work in the federal government in a grant program back in the late 60s, and I got a chance to see all the federal agencies, the FBI, DEA, Secret Service, and I was fascinated and just with what the Secret Service responsibilities were, the fact that it had protective responsibilities and that it had investigative responsibilities.
Well, you know, and for people that don't know, I guess it really falls under the Treasury Department.
Up until 2004, the Secret Service was part of the Treasury Department. After the reorganization of government in 2004, it's now part of the Department of Homeland Security.
Now, as it relates to the 60s, you mentioned, were you, maybe not, inspired at all from the story of President Kennedy and a lot of the attention that went with Secret Service? Did that have an effect?
I don't think that there was an agent who came in during that time period that wasn't somehow affected or that it wasn't something that was on their mind. And it's something that you saw at that time, and it was very influential in terms of saying this is something that we cannot ever allow to happen again.
Now, you 29-year career and ended up as the district manager, if you will, running the New Jersey division of the Secret Service. And ultimately, where did it all start? You know, there must be so much. I want to keep you here for hours.
Well, it all started, I was hired after leaving the Department of Justice, I was hired by the Secret Service to work in the New York field office, where you begin your career doing criminal investigations, doing temporary protective assignments on visiting foreign heads of state, to kind of gain your experience level. And one of the unique things about the Secret Service is the fact that the more you show you can handle responsibility, in fact, the more responsibility they will give you.
Well, that's a good thing. That makes sense, right? Just the opposite. The government gets a bad rap about the, you know, the Peter principle going the opposite way, but obviously with something as important as the Secret Service, that's the deal. So, you know, I don't mean to say tell me the exciting stories. I guess a lot of what you do ends up being somewhat boring because it's hours and hours to make certain everything goes well. But did you get assigned to a detail? Were you involved with presidential security, heads of state? Kind of bring us through some of the interesting things.
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned the fact that use the words, you know, and sometimes boring, and that can be it. I was fortunate in my career that I was assigned permanently to the White House, to President Reagan, and then to President Bush 41. I had a long career at the White House where I was involved strictly with presidential protection, which meant every day you go to work at the White House, you are responsible for the president, you accompany him everywhere the president goes. It is a daunting task every day to walk through those gates and the pressure that is on you, but knowing that the agents that have gone out and set up all the advance work, that have done all the security preparations, having faith in them in an entire team effort makes you know that you can do your job.
Jan, what were they like? What, you know, was it strictly business and it was unprofessional to engage in banter like that, or did you end up having a relationship somewhat with the presidents?
Well, the reality is, as a Secret Service agent, you're there to do a job, and you keep it at the highest professional level. There are times, certainly, when the President or the First Lady will address you regarding a question or a subject, and very often you find that you do build up an amount of personal relationships. I was there for quite a long time with the Reagans and had been with them as a candidate, so I did get to know them very well. And as the president told me once, very often when he wasn't sure where to go, he would look for my hair, and he would just say, I would look for your gray hair because I've had it for many years, and just follow that.
Just Irishman to Irishman, you'd have,
exactly.
Have some fun talks. Now, speaking of which, you know, Reagan obviously very early in his presidency, there was an assassination attempt. Were you tangentially involved in that? Were you on that day? I was
not. I was working, but not at that site. I was working later that night and actually reported to the hospital that evening when he was shot. The way things were done those days, realizing it was back many years ago, the reality was it was an area set aside for the press on a public sidewalk. the courts had ruled that the Secret Service had to allow public into those areas. And again, it was before the use of magnetometers. Everything changed with that assassination attempt.
To me, that was one of the service's finest hours. There's many that we probably don't know about, but they unequivocally saved his life, not only by pushing out of the way, but jumping in the way and then getting him to the hospital in the right
Well, the interesting part, if you realize that the bullet that actually struck the president was a ricochet. It came off, the investigation showed that it hit the rear quarter panel of the car and actually traveled up in between the door and the car, and it was flattened like a dime, which, if you remember, the president said he really didn't feel being struck with the bullet. He didn't feel it when it happened, and that was because the bullet had flattened and went in, actually spinning, and went in like about the size of a dime.
Well, I know his famous line when they were about to put him under to the doctor, saying, I hope that you're a Republican.
And the doctor's words were, "Today we're all Republicans, Mr. President." He had that sense of humor that in the toughest of moments, he could say something that would relax everyone around him. In our positions, we got to watch and see the way he handled himself, and he would very often do that when everyone else was tense or had a very difficult moment. He would say something that would relax everyone.
Now, we could talk about just your time with the Reagans, let alone with the Bushes, but there's been so much that you've done. You were responsible for security at Salt Lake City at the Winter Olympics. Talk about that a little bit. What an undertaking.
Well, directly after 9/11, major events in the United States were given the titled National Special Security Events, and the federal government dictated that the Secret Service would be in charge of all national special security events. The Super Bowl in 2002 was given that designation as a national special security event. So a number of senior managers, I was the special agent in charge at that time, were sent down to work in New Orleans and part of the team effort with New Orleans Police Department, the state police, and to put together a plan to make sure that the Super Bowl was in fact secure. And directly from there, the Secret Service was responsible for the Winter Olympics, and we then, the same senior management team, moved from the Super Bowl to the Winter Olympics, where we we're fortunate to manage that.
Every once in a while we have a visitor of some note at the United Nations. I know you've been involved in, the T's opening up to this truthfully. Heads of state, kings, queens.
Well, the Secret Service is responsible for any visiting foreign head of state or government that comes to the United States. And as you mentioned, yearly is the meetings of the General Assembly. And so what we found over the years was New Jersey actually grew, and many heads of state, rather than using New York airports, would come in through New Jersey, through Newark International Airport, through Liberty International. And that made the number of heads of state we would see grow exponentially. And very often here in New Jersey, Northern New Jersey, they would come here to visit various places of interest, West Orange being one of them.
Well, Jan, what's interesting to me when a dignitary comes in from maybe someone that's not very friendly to the United States. I use Iran, for example. How does that work? Would they bring armed security with them? Do they have to disarm themselves? Are you in charge?
Well, any visitor to the United States, the U.S. Secret Service is in charge like that. However, there is a reciprocity. If we were to go to their country, we would expect certain courtesies. So the State Department will make a decision as to whether or not and to what level their presidential security can be armed. But the Secret Service is in fact in charge, and it's your mission to work collectively with their people. Again, it's not a political event for us, it's a responsibility. Therefore, having that responsibility, it's important that we are able to interact and work well with whatever nation comes in and their security people.
Jan, one last question. The biggest change, I would imagine, not teasing, they were using walkie-talkies when you started 29 years ago. With the technology, is that the biggest?
Well, that I think you're absolutely right. Technology, the changes in technology from seeing things after the Reagan assassination to the complete use of magnetometers at every presidential site wherever the president goes. The enhanced intelligence capabilities that we now have play an integral part on the ability to protect someone, certainly, and certainly what goes on electronically with computers nowadays and the internet. It's Secret Service was given jurisdiction in electronic crimes, and we have a group now that is set up that does all electronic crimes in task force methodology, bringing in everyone to try and work together. So it has been a huge change.
Well, Jan, you gracefully watched it all for 30 years as you've had an incredibly distinguished career. You're a special person, and thanks not only for what you have done, but what you'll continue to do in the future.
Thank you very much.
And you got to come back and see us again. Now, up next, meet the mayor of the Essex County Township that New Jersey Magazine ranked among the top 3 school districts in the state. We'll be right back.